You may wonder why turntables have different speeds, especially since the only thing changing it seems to do is make your music sound funny. It dates back to the War of the Speeds when Columbia introduced the 33 1/3 RPM long-playing record in 1948, and then RCA Victor quickly followed it with their 45 RPM format in 1949. And then in 1950, Zenith thought it would be a good idea to introduce 16 RPM records. And for compatibility with older turntables, 78 RPM records remained in production for another decade beyond that. So for quite a while, it was common to see record players with up to 4 different speeds on them. But 16 RPM records never really caught on in the consumer market, and eventually most people disposed of their old 78s. That left us with 2 remaining speeds, 33 and 45. But what was so hard about picking one of those 2 and sticking with it? Why couldn't the industry come together and standardize on a single speed? Well, the answer is they tried to, but it didn't work. Going back to the battle between Columbia's LP and RCA Victor's 45 in the late 40s, both companies proclaimed that their format was your one solution to all of your music listening needs. For example, RCA Victor had 45 singles with 1 song per side, extended play 45s with 2 songs per side, and box sets of 45 albums, which you could stack up and play on your automatic record changer. .33 1/3 RPM LP records were originally only available in 10 and 12-inch sizes, but when RCA Victor introduced the 7-inch 45 RPM record, Columbia hastily announced that they were going to begin selling 7-inch LPs as well. They claimed the timing was purely coincidental and they had been planning it all along. Yeah, I don't believe that either. They ran ads with Arthur Godfrey proclaiming that the Columbia 7-inch LP record completes the 33 1/3 RPM one-speed system, the new standard for convenient recorded entertainment. Now you can get everything from a 3-minute popular hit to a complete symphony, each in its natural length on a single record. But this standoff between the 2 record industry giants didn't last long. In January 1950, RCA Victor announced that they were going to begin selling 33 1/3 RPM LP records, and in August 1950, Columbia announced that they were going to begin selling 45s, each of them claiming to have improved the other company's invention. So from then on, it seemed like the standard had been permanently set, that 7-inch 45 RPM records were for singles, and 12-inch 33 1/3 RPM records were for albums. And the album boxes of 45s were dropped from the market, while 7-inch 33 1/3 RPM records were relegated to promotional and educational use. That might seem like the end of the story, but almost a decade later, the introduction of stereo brought forth both new opportunities and old rivalries. In 1958, all the major record labels began releasing stereo LPs, including both Columbia and RCA Victor, and also in 1958, many record companies began releasing stereo 45s. This website has a long list of them, and you can find many different record labels producing stereo 45s, but noticeably absent from the list is Columbia. As the author of the website says, Columbia was a big exception, still stubbornly holding on to the 33 1/3 speed they introduced in 1948 and shunning their rival RCA's upstart 45 RPM speed. In July 1959, Columbia opted instead to resurrect the idea of releasing music on 7-inch 33 1/3 RPM records, this time exclusively in stereo, which they referred to as Stereo 7. Columbia's reasoning was that the people who were buying and playing stereo LPs would rather stick with the same spindle size and speed for playing 7-inch records then have to adjust their turntable speed and install an adapter to play a 45. Also, many record changers of the era allowed different sizes of records to be intermixed, allowing you to stack up 7 and 12-inch records together and play them in sequence without any adjustments necessary. You might think the slower speed would make them sound worse than 45s, but these discs were pressed on thicker and heavier vinyl than 45s, while retaining the raised center label that allows you to stack them on a record changer without the grooves touching, and they sound just as good as full-size LP albums. The first artists to be released on Stereo 7s included Johnny Mathis, Duke Ellington, Tony Bennett, which you just heard, Mitch Miller, The Four Lads, Percy Faith, and Ray Conniff. And if you recognize any of those names, you know that none of them are even remotely what you would consider to be rock and roll. As Columbia President Goddard Lieberson explained, we are aiming Stereo 7 at what we think is a new and different audience for single records, the adult audience, which has largely abandoned single record buying in recent years. As consistent 33 1/3 RPM buyers and stereo fans in growing numbers, we believe they will be attracted by a 33 1/3 RPM single. They have obviously never been attracted to 45 RPM singles requiring spindle adaptation. One of the staunchest supporters of the format was Seeburg. In January 1960, they announced that all of their new jukeboxes could play 33 1/3 RPM 7-inch records, and 45s too. Seeburg's vice president Jack Gordon even went so far as to proclaim, "The 45 is on the way out." Those jukeboxes use the same method as this portable record player to automatically detect the speed of the record being played. The platter has a spring-loaded spindle adapter, so if a 45 with the large center hole is placed on the platter, it plays at 45 RPM.
They say don't go on Wolverton Mountain.
And if a record with the small spindle hole is placed on the platter, it pushes down on this adapter, which engages the 33 1/3 RPM speed. You can hear it click as it changes the speeds.
The first reading on side 2 of this sample record is from the America Listens to Literature record that accompanies the 10th grade America Reads anthology, Exploring Life Through Literature.
In June 1960, Capitol Records got on board with the idea with what they called the Compact 33, although unlike Columbia's Stereo 7s, these were available in both stereo and mono. You can see the sales pitch right on the sleeve. Plays at album speed, no special spindles, no extra adapters, highest fidelity, although I can't say much about the mass appeal of the music on this one.
Push up every morning, 10 times push up, starting low. Once more on the rise, nuts to the flabby guys. Go, you chicken fat, go away. Go, you chicken fat, go.
As Billboard magazine explained, Capitol is throwing its full weight in favor of the record industry eventually returning to a standard one-speed basis. It is believed in some industry quarters that the singles market would enjoy a substantial sales boost once the one-speed goal is achieved. Stereo took longer to catch on than they expected, so in July 1960, Columbia announced that they were going to begin releasing 7-inch 33 1/3 RPM singles in mono as well as stereo, and this time they referred to them simply as 33s, because if referring to a format by its speed worked for 45s, then it should work just as well for 33s. Columbia also announced that going forward, all mono singles would be released in both 45 and 33 1/3 RPM speeds. For example, these two Columbia 45s both have printed on their covers, also available on single 33. In addition to Columbia and Capitol Records, you may be surprised to learn that RCA Victor also announced they were going to begin making 33 1/3 RPM 7-inch singles. They announced that in November 1960. This was their original promo record for what they called the Compact 33. They were available in stereo and mono, or what they called regular. This promo disc has both on it. And here they called it RCA Victor's neat new record, the Compact 33. This is the great new 7-inch record everyone is talking about. It plays on the same speed as your 12-inch LPs, 33 1/3 RPM, and it fits right on your LP turntable. Just think what a blast this will be at parties. You can put both the Compact 33s and your 12-inch LPs on the same player and then get continuous entertainment with hot new singles and your favorite albums. No speed dials to switch, no need for adapters. The Compact 33 makes record collecting more fun than ever, and easier too. But RCA Victor's Compact 33s were not just available as singles with one song per side, but also as doubles with 2 songs per side. And that wasn't just an attempt to one-up what Columbia and Capitol were offering. That was also because, as you might have guessed by the fact that you probably have never heard of these things before, 33 RPM singles were not a great success. As Billboard magazine wrote in May 1961, a Columbia spokesman said last week that sales of their 33 singles, as against 45 singles, are very poor, and no other company is claiming any great sales action on 33 singles. This puts the industry in something of a quandary. Although all branches of the industry would like to see a one-speed business, almost every manufacturer appears shy at the moment about putting out any of their artists on single 33s only. They are afraid of wasting a release and possibly hurting an artist if the sales don't come through. Thus, the attempt to test the 33 market through the compact double, as Victor and Cameo are doing. These compact doubles did not succeed in reviving interest in 7-inch 33 records, so several manufacturers tried releasing 7-inch 33 records with 3 songs per side. Cadence Records called them Little LPs, and Mercury called them Compact 6. Because they had 6 songs total, 3 on each side. And those were a failure as well. But in 1962, Seeburg picked up the idea of the Little LP and began making them for their jukeboxes, also with 3 songs per side, because Seeburg was still fully in favor of 7-inch 33 records, even if consumers had rejected them. In this press release announcing the Little LPs, they said in 1960, Seeburg virtually forced a reluctant and protesting industry to follow our adoption of the 33 1/3 stereo record. We actively championed the rising profit potential in 33 1/3 stereo. But profit potentials were not rising on the consumer market, and by 1964, the record companies had given up on the idea of releasing music on 7-inch 33s. There were a couple reasons why the attempt to create a one-speed system for all records by releasing 33 RPM singles was a failure. The first is that it was a failure the first time around, and then Columbia tried to bring it back almost a decade later. Well, if it was such a good idea, it would have been a success the first time. And then almost 10 years later, they tried to bring it back, this time exclusively in stereo, when very few people had stereo record players. Also, I have to blame it on the decision to focus on the adult market at a time when rock and roll was booming. RCA Victor did release some 33 RPM singles and doubles aimed at teenagers, but it was too little, too late. And despite the predictions of 45s being on their way out, they ended up becoming more popular than ever in the 1960s. For example, this portable record player from 1967 has a clip built into the lid for holding them. So even if you did own some 33s, they'd have to stay home while all your favorite 45s went to the party. So that's the story of how the entire record industry tried to cancel the 45 RPM speed, including the company who invented it. But teenagers fought back and refused to stop buying 45s, so that's why all turntables still have at least 2 speeds today, 33 and 45.